So you take a perfectly functional design, like this neon high-energy funk poster, and then you replace just one element with something that absolutely does not belong there. It could be the typeface, it could be an icon, but in this case, we're going with a nuclear option, which is the image. Instead of the cool headphone-wearing DJ radiating pink nightclub energy, we're going to drop in a sweet grandmother quietly knitting a scarf while she's waiting for her turn on the decks. Suddenly, the poster becomes unintentionally hilarious, confusing maybe, and also beautifully wrong. And that's exactly the point of this exercise. Because when something in a design shocks a system, even in the smallest way, it forces the viewer to remember it. Iconic designs often aren't iconic because they're perfect. They're iconic because they have one strong, unmistakable idea or concept. Maybe an element that stands out so clearly, you can identify the poster from across the street. Once you learn how one unexpected or awkward element can actually completely steal the show, you can flip that skill around and deliberately create the right element. The one that should steal the show. You can pinpoint the iconic ingredient on a design and you can control attention. And when you can finally control attention, everything you create becomes more impactful. If you can only design strong, simple designs, you are an asset producer. But if you can design a cross sequence with attention, you're thinking like a creative director. Let me give you a practical example. So imagine you're designing a 5-slide Instagram carousel for a brand announcement. Most designers will treat all 5 slides the same, or pretty much the same. So same layout structure, same grids, same headline placement, that kind of thing. Just swapping text and maybe imagery and it will look consistent, sure, but it doesn't feel dynamic. So we can always approach this differently. Slide 1 should not just quote unquote look good, it should create some kind of tension. It should spark curiosity. So maybe it introduces a bold claim. Maybe it isolates a provocative phrase with heavy contrast and breathing room. And then slide 2 shouldn't just repeat that kind of energy. It should expand that idea. So maybe it introduces a deeper context. The typography shifts slightly, the layout opens up, but the visual language is the same. And slide 3 could shift emphasis, so perhaps the hierarchy changes, maybe a key statistic becomes more dominant. The focal point moves intentionally. And slide 4 adds a visual breather of sorts. It becomes clean and it adds a visual break from too much information. And slide 5 delivers the payoff. It's the brand statement, it's the call to action, and it's clean and it's confident. The visual noise is minimal and it feels resolved. That's narrative architecture in graphic design. You're controlling the rhythm, the pacing, the tension, and the release, visually speaking, of course. And this does apply beyond just social media graphics. If every poster in a campaign looks exactly the same, you're just repeating the layouts. Visual narrative building means asking, where does the eye begin in the sequence? Where does it escalate? Where does it pause? And where does it resolve? So try to think of your designs as mini stories in some respects, and then you can build some kind of dynamic narrative, yet maintain the same visual language across the board. Everything is quicker now, right? Which is great, but it's also why a lot of work is starting to blur together. Sometimes you can scroll through a bunch of designs online in certain areas, and they might all start to sit in the same space, so to speak. And then you can come across something where someone has clearly taken a bit more time with it. Not loads necessarily, just enough to think properly. And then it stands out straight away. And why is that? Well, because it feels more considered. Speed is useful, obviously, but it doesn't actually fix weak thinking. It just makes things happen faster. So maybe take something simple like a quote graphic. The fast version looks clean, nice font, center text, maybe a soft gradient behind it. Yeah, it works, but you've seen this kind of thing 100 times before. Then you see another version where the quote mark itself is the actual focal point and the main part of the design. Maybe the alignment is broken off a bit, and maybe the vibe is just very different here. It's a bit more minimal, it's a bit more design-esque, so to speak. And you can see how the vibe of this actually fits the visual language for this thing a lot more, and thus it just feels more on point. Here's something that takes a long time for most designers to unlearn, and that is designing to impress. Beginners usually design for approval alone. They try to impress their client with skill or some kind of Photoshop effect. They want their client or their boss to say, wow, and they chase aesthetic praise like, that looks amazing, or I love the color choice here. But the truth is, none of that means the design is actually working. Experts don't have a priority of their design being admired. They design to get a result. The focus actually shifts from pleasing people to guiding actions. Do majority of users click here? Did they read this? Did they buy? Did they remember? That's the shift that really matters. If a client says, yeah, this looks okay, but the campaign gets 40% more conversions, that's a win. And as a designer, your job is to make things actually happen. So before you even open up your software, ask yourself what success actually looks like. So on that project, does it look like more signups, more product sales, higher time spent on a landing page? If you can define that goal first, then design backwards from it. You might say, well, my client doesn't actually care about that. They just want things to look a certain way. Okay, your client likely is actually low tier in the business world, and they likely pay you very little money for your time. Part of the designer's role in the real world is to demonstrate and persuade a client why your design choices work and how they benefit them, maybe financially or in some other way. You take one typeface, in this case that's mullish, and then you force it to speak 3 totally different moods. It could be literally anything, but I want to try out elegant, dynamic, and authoritative. The rule is simple. You're only allowed to use weight, scale, tracking, italic, and alignment. No new typefaces, no cheating, and no color use. Let's start with the elegant style. So mullish suddenly becomes soft-spoken and delicate, almost like it's trying to recite poetry in a candlelit room. Thin weight, generous tracking, and maybe a quiet center alignment. And then we flip it. Now mullish goes completely dynamic. Thick weight, aggressive scaling, tighter spacing, and the letters practically sprint across the layout. It's the same typeface, but just a completely different personality. And finally, the authority style. So straight, bold, centered, or left locked with no negotiation. No italics, no whispers, just solid, here I am, here are the rules, and you're gonna follow them. Again, the same typeface, but 3 totally different visual behaviors. This exercise helps you develop something many designers never truly learn or develop, and that is full typography control. Instead of saying, I need a fancy font or I need something bold, you start understanding why type feels the way it feels. You learn how spacing changes tone and how scale changes confidence, and also things like how alignment changes intention on a design. You then stop relying on downloading new fonts for every single project, and instead, you learn to squeeze every expressive drop out of the ones you already have. And this is the difference between a designer who knows fonts and a designer who knows typography, and clients can actually feel that instantly. So for a moment, let's put 2 versions of a design side by side as a kind of thought experiment. One built the long way and one built with a more current setup. They might look the same in the end, or at least similar, if they're both derived from your creative brain. But one of them gives you a lot more space to actually think about what you're making, or simply to chill and do other things. And that is the bit that matters the most here. Staying up to date with new tools and having the willingness to change and evolve is so crucial for graphic designers. And then you get to this crucial point, which kind of ties a lot of this together. It's the idea that more equals better. So consider how many layers are possibly on this design or how complex it is. And then consider this second design and how many layers are stacked in Photoshop on this one. They are trying to say the same thing here, but one does it simply and with less work and less headaches. And believe it or not, some designers do consider somehow that more layers, more effects, or more details always equates to a better design. And yeah, it can look impressive in some instances, but if you consider design thinking and look deeper into why a design should exist in the first place, then it becomes very, very obvious that more does not actually correlate to a better outcome. The key idea is to get the idea across with your visual language and not stack layers and push the boundaries of the software. Rather, push the boundaries of your concepts and your concept mindset. This is one of the clearest examples of what's really going on here in this video. This is another design from the AGDA Awards, and it is the Elseworld project. And straight away, it feels more human, right, than anything else you've seen. The typography almost looks handwritten, like it wasn't overthought too much. But notice how it bleeds into the layout without a shred of shame at all. It's overlapping elements all over the place. And this should feel messy, but really it doesn't. And this is where everything comes together, because when you look across all the bottles, you'll notice everything still holds together. The tone is consistent, the energy is consistent, and the way everything is composed still feels well thought out. So yeah, it's not polished in a way that we've been taught, like machine style polished. But it's not careless either, it just feels honest, like truly honest. And that is a huge difference here, because this kind of work is confident enough not to try and impress you with clean, perfect design. And that's exactly why it stands out right now in today's world. Because in a world where perfect design is instant and everywhere, being perfect will make your work, well, invisible. And now compare that to something like the Aqua logo project by 6 Ink. And now everything might seem minimal and clean again, at a first glance that is, of course. That expressive human feel that we've just looked at starts to disappear, and instead we find something much more controlled. But here's the interesting part. This might look almost too simple to be interesting. Just a few geometric shapes, nothing overly complicated at all. But the more you look at it, the stranger it does get. Lines are intersecting in ways that feel slightly weird or awkward, the balance feels unconventional, and there's a weird kind of intersection at the top. And yet somehow, it holds together perfectly. It doesn't follow the kind of clean, predictable geometry you'd expect from a minimal logo design. And that's exactly why it's differentiating itself here. This is what I mean by intelligent imperfection. Even in something like this very stripped back logo, there's a willingness to break symmetry, to let forms overlap in ways that feel a little uncomfortable. And this is something you can take straight into your own work. So instead of aiming for perfect balance every single time, try introducing a slight disruption somewhere. Let elements intersect, let shapes push into each other, and then refine it until it still feels cohesive in some way. And if this has made you look at graphic design differently, even just slightly, then click one of the videos on screen, because what you have just seen here is only part of a much bigger shift happening right now. But until next time guys, design your future today. Peace.